Welcome to the sixth in our series of workshops on developing the next generation of research leaders for sustainable development. WUN is offering the series in collaboration with UNESCO and with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. The workshops are intended to help enlarge the networking opportunities for researchers in the early stages of their careers. An important part of WUN's mission is to nurture research talent. And historically, we've done that through a mobility program aimed at early career researchers. That program, along with many of the other means by which researchers typically establish their collaborative networks, has of course been upended by COVID-19. This series of workshops is a response to that. They're intended to help researchers find peers and potential collaborators who have related interests. But we're not viewing the workshops as just a stopgap until life gets back to normal. If they're a success, we will have created a vehicle for enlarging opportunity generally, and especially for researchers whose freedom to collaborate internationally has in the past been limited by financial or other restrictions on travel. The emphasis on the SDGs, and each workshop will explore one and the research challenges that attend it, stems from WUN's adoption of sustainable development as the principal research focus of its strategic plan. Later in this session, I'll say more about the particulars of our research agenda and the ways in which you can become involved in it. But first, we'll hear from our special guest, Dr. Jane Goodall, who will characterize some of the rich research challenges and opportunities presented by SDG 15, Life on Land. As Aoife mentioned, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function, and we'll take questions following Dr. Goodall's remarks. Dr. Goodall hardly needs an introduction. She is an ethologist and environmentalist, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute, and a United Nations Messenger of Peace. In July 1960, at the age of 26, she traveled from the UK to what is now Tanzania, and ventured into the little-known world of the wild chimpanzees living in the Gombe. Equipped with a notebook, binoculars, and a fascination for wildlife, Dr. Goodall braved a realm of unknowns to give the world a remarkable window into humankind's closest living relatives. Through more than 60 years of groundbreaking work, she has shown us the urgent need to protect chimpanzees from extinction, and she has redefined species conservation to include the needs of local people and the environment. Today, there are 25 Jane Goodall Institutes that support core programs in community conservation, 2 sanctuaries for orphan chimpanzees, and Roots and Shoots, an environmental and humanitarian program empowering young people of all ages to become involved in community and conservation projects in more than 65 countries. Dr. Goodall has received many awards and honorary degrees for her work. She's authored books for adults and children and featured in numerous documentaries and films. Dr. Goodall, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. And hello to everybody who's listening, the unseen audience. And let me start, since you're all, far away, I will start by greeting you with the distance call of the chimpanzee. That simply means this is me, this is Jane. And I thought that I'd start off by bringing the voice of an animal into this discussion. We're living in pretty grim times, aren't we? I think you'll all agree to that. We're facing the twin threats of climate change and loss of biodiversity. And it's all due to our disrespect of the natural world. We're destroying forests, polluting water and air, killing the soil, and all of this is leading to the loss of more and more species of animals and plants. There is this crazy idea out there that there can be unlimited global economic development on a planet with finite natural resources. We've already used up some of these precious resources in some places faster than nature can replenish them. And there's a growing population of humans and our livestock. Equally stupid, in my view, is the idea that the growth of GDP is more important than protecting the environment for future generations. And incidentally, it's our disrespect of nature that's led to the current pandemic. Because as we destroy habitats, some animal species are driven into closer contact with humans and their livestock. We treat animals as commodities, hunting, killing, capturing, traffic them around the world to sell for food, medicine, and as exotic pets in horrible wildlife markets. And they take their pathogens with them. COVID-19, like SARS, probably began when a virus jumped from an animal to a human in a wildlife market in China. MERS began from contact with a camel in Saudi Arabia. HIV/AIDS 1 and HIV/AIDS 2 from chimpanzees in bushmeat markets in 2 parts of Central Africa. That's just a few examples of these zoonotic diseases. Other new zoonotic diseases come from domestic animals crowded into cruel and so often unhygienic factory farms. Scientists studying these zoonotic diseases predicted a pandemic. We're paying the price now for not heeding their warning. The silver lining is that I think this pandemic has caused more people to realize that we do need a new relationship with nature and a new, more sustainable economy. More people, I think, realize that we're part of and depend on the natural world for food, water, clean air, shelter, everything. But what we depend on is healthy ecosystems. It was in the forests of Gombe that I learned about the interconnection of life. And every species has a role to play. I like to think of an ecosystem as a glorious tapestry of life. But when one small species becomes extinct, it may not seem to matter. But maybe that was the main food source of another species that will also become extinct. And maybe that was important for another species, which will vanish, and so on and so on. And every time we lose a species, it's as though a thread is pulled from that tapestry until eventually it hangs in tatters and leads to ecosystem collapse. And as I say, it's healthy ecosystems that we depend on. Then we find that ecosystems are also interrelated. The ocean, for example, produces most of the rainfall and huge amounts of the oxygen that we need. And misuse of land through industrial agriculture that sprays poisonous chemicals onto our food, which is killing the soil, so that more and more artificial fertilizer must be used. And all of this, along with industrial and household waste, is washed by rain into rivers and thus pollutes the ocean. You see the interrelatedness of it all? And there's another interrelationship, and that's between people and the environment that involves the economic status and lifestyles of Earth's citizens. Many of us lead unsustainable lifestyles. We have far more than we need. We consume far more of nature's resources than we need, and we create vast amounts of waste. Competition between international corporations to produce cheap meat and cheap food has led to factory farms and monocultures and genetically modified foods. And this not only involves tremendous cruelty to animals on the intensive farms, and incidentally, terrible conditions for those who work on those farms, but they also require the destruction of ever more habitat to grow the grain, to feed the animals. They use huge amounts of water, increasingly scarce in some places, in order to change plant to animal protein. And then the animals create methane gas during their digestion, but we all do. And that is one of the very virulent greenhouse gases, fortunately not as frequent as carbon dioxide that comes, as you all know, from burning of fossil fuels and so on. I want to just make a point that these concentration camps for animals and the way that we treat animals as commodities leads to horrendous cruelty, because we now know, and the chimps helped science to change, that animals are sentient beings, that we're causing tremendous pain and suffering in our intensive farms. And these intensive farms are breeding places for new zoonotic diseases. People living in poverty cut down the last trees in their desperate effort to grow more food or make money from charcoal, simply in order to survive. They fish the last fish for the same reason, not because they don't understand, but because they have to. The urban poor, and their numbers are swelling as increasingly hostile conditions force them to move into the cities. And they must buy the cheapest food just to survive. They can't afford the luxury that we can of making ethical choices in what they buy and avoiding products that harm the environment, involve cruelty to animals, or child slave labor, sweatshops, unfair wages, and so on. They must buy the cheapest to survive. So what must we do? We have to work together on many different issues. And it's not going to be easy, but I sense a will around the world. I sense a feeling that, yes, we've arrived at a crossroads and more people are deciding that we must take the path towards a more sustainable future, difficult though it may be. What we have to do, well, clearly we have to alleviate poverty. It was when I flew over the tiny Gombe National Park at the end of the 1980s that I realized what was happening. In 1960, when I began in Gombe, the little tiny national park was part of the great equatorial forest belt that stretched across Africa. And by the late 1980s, it was a tiny island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could survive, too poor to buy food from elsewhere. And that's when I realized if we don't help these people to find ways of living without destroying their environment, there's no way we can save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And so the Jane Goodall Institute in the early 1990s began a program that we called Take Care, or Takari, a very holistic program that improves the life of people and helps them to understand that protecting the environment is not just for wildlife, it's for their own future. And that program is now in 104 villages throughout the chimpanzee range in Tanzania. And the people have become our partners in conservation. We work with them, and we worked with them right from the beginning, not going into the villages as a group of arrogant white people telling them what to do, but going in with a tiny group of locally picked Tanzanians who asked them, what can JGI do to help you? That's how it began, and that's how it should be. We must work with local communities and indigenous people and find ways for them to make a livelihood without destroying their environment. And so that program is now in 6 other African countries, and it's growing. And we're about to produce a book. It's called Takari, the JGI Method of Community-Led Conservation. There's something which I often get challenged on, but we cannot afford to ignore human population growth. You know, there's about just over 7 billion of us on the planet today, and already we're using up some of these precious natural resources faster than nature can replenish them. It's predicted there will be closer to 10 billion or more by 2050. So if we carry on with business as usual, what's going to happen? We must think about it. And try and come up with solutions. Introductory, we provide scholarships to keep girls in school. We provide microcredit opportunities for women and men, but especially women, to start their own small environmentally sustainable businesses. And we provide family planning. The people want family planning because they know that educating their children is a way out of poverty. They cannot afford to educate the 8 or 10 family children that they used to have. And so it's something that's, I feel, incredibly important in the world today. What else must we do? We must persuade governments and corporations to adopt ethical practices in relation to the environment. And here, the consumers have a really important role to play, and so do the voters. But if you don't like the way a corporation works, the way it produces its food, we have a choice, not if we're the rural poor or the urban poor, but the rest of us. If we don't like the way they produce their product, we don't buy them. That's as simple as that. It's changing corporations already as I speak. And in countries that are democratic, we have a choice to vote for the right politicians who will understand the need to protect the environment for the future. What else must we do? We must ban the trafficking of animals around the world. And we must abolish factory farms. We have to. It's just something that I feel really, really strongly about. Then we have to think again about agriculture. And this commercial agriculture, the monocultures, the genetically modified foods, that has to go. And we have to move to supporting and encouraging small family farms, restorative agriculture, permaculture, and so forth. We have to move towards a plant-based diet. I became a vegetarian long ago because I care about animals. And when I learned about factory farms from Peter Singer's book, Animal Liberation, that was way back in the late 1960s. Next time I looked at meat on my plate, I thought, this signifies fear, pain, death. That was it. And now I'm trying to be vegan. It's not always easy, but while I'm at home, which I have been since the pandemic began, it's not difficult at all. We have to plant trees and restore and protect forests. We have to clean up the rivers and the lakes, and that will help to clean up the oceans. And then something that's so important, we must ensure that all schools include the environment in their curricula. Children need to learn the problems. And that's why I began our Roots and Shoots program that was mentioned in the introduction. It was back in 1991, when young people, as I traveled around the world, were telling me that they were losing hope because we compromised their future and there was nothing they could do about it. So we have compromised the future of our young people. We've been stealing it for years and years. We're still stealing it today. And that has to stop. So Roots and Shoots began with 12 high school students from 8 schools in Tanzania who came to talk to me because they were concerned about poaching of animals in the national parks. Why wasn't the government in Tanzania doing something about it? They were worried about the illegal dynamite fishing that was destroying the coral reefs. They were worried about street children with no homes, sniffing glue. They were worried about the cruel treatment of stray dogs and animals in the market. So I told them to go and get their friends who cared about these same sort of things. And Roots and Shoots was born with the message that every single one of us makes some impact on the planet every single day. And we have a choice as to what sort of impact we make. And we decided, because of the interrelationship of life, that every group between them would choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. And one of the important things that's come out of this Roots and Shoots program, which is now in over 65 countries, involves children from preschool and then university and everything in between, and more young people who've left university and are out there in the business world. And so it's by bringing these young people together as often as we can, usually virtually, but sometimes face-to-face, they're understanding that far more important than the color of your skin or your culture or your religion is the fact that we're all human beings. If we fall and hurt ourselves, our blood is the same. When we weep, our tears are the same. And when we laugh, that feeling of laughter is the same. We're all one human family. So to end up with, the media is full of doom and gloom, and they have a job to tell us all the horrible things that are going on, of which I've mentioned just a few, but there's also so much good news. And I was meeting the projects around the world where places that we totally destroyed, given time or perhaps some help, can once again support nature and biodiversity. And I've met amazing people who tackle projects to restore the natural world, to help give animals close to extinction another chance. And they're wonderful stories, and we need to share them, because a big problem today is that people look at the whole picture and they feel helpless and hopeless. What can I do? I'm one individual. What can I do? It's hopeless. And so they give up and they do nothing. Apathy is the biggest danger we face. But if you get together and you decide to take action and you start cleaning up a stream or picking up litter or planting trees or working to protect an area and save it from development from yet another supermarket, then you have a sense of well-being. You've done something, you've made a difference, and that gives you hope, and that inspires you to do more. And that in turn inspires other people to join in this effort to make this a better world for people, animals, and the environment. I love the rewilding efforts that are going on around the world, particularly across Europe. And then, you know, my greatest reason for hope is the youth. Once they know the problems and they're empowered to take action. The amazing human brain, the intellect that makes us more different from chimps and other animals than everything else, is beginning to tackle some of these terrible problems that we have caused with renewable energy and all sorts of other amazing technologies, and helping us to think as individuals of how we can leave a lighter ecological footprint. And then, as I've said, there's the resilience of nature. I described Gombe as a little island of forest surrounded by bare hills in the late 1980s. Fly over it today, no more bare hills. Nature has come back from the amazing resilience, seeds left in the soil, sometimes the roots of trees. Given time, they flourish. And then finally, and lastly, that's what I call the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle what seems impossible and won't give up and inspire others to join them, and so often succeed. So that's our challenge. These are the things that we have to do. And let's rise to that challenge, because each one of us makes a difference every day. Each one of us has this indomitable spirit. Let it grow, let it out there, let it into the world and make it a better place for the sake of future generations and the health of the planet and the environment and the wildlife that I so love. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodall, for these very illuminating and inspiring remarks, for framing the issues so clearly, and for identifying some of the major research problems and, of course, the opportunities that arise from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Aoife will now present you with some questions if you're willing to take them on.
Yes, I hurried to get through, so you could ask some questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Dr. Goodall, unsurprisingly, we've received many questions from our attendees, and we'll see how many we can get to. Firstly, Dr. Goodall, what is the first thing young scientists and people can do to make a positive incremental difference to the environment on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think I sort of answered that, didn't I? I mean, you can choose what you buy, how it was made, where it came from, was it harmful to the environment? And then everybody's a little bit different. Some people can plant trees. We need to move to a plant-based diet, which for some people is tough. But fortunately, there's alternatives to meat coming up thick and fast, you know, and some of these, oh, they're amazing. I mean, when I tried to be vegan, and I am vegan while I'm at home, you know, the cheeses and the sausages and all these other things, they taste just like real cheese and real sausage, but there are no animal products in them. And it's not just the meat, it's the eggs and the milk and the conditions of the laying hens and the cows. The life they lead is terrible. And I'm not sure that people really want to find out about it, but if you wonder why you should have moved to a plant-based diet, look at some of these secretly filmed videos and you'll realize how important it is, because all of these animals can feel fear and despair and pain.
Thank you. Second question is that there are an enormous number of research challenges awaiting action and solutions. What advice do you give to beginning researchers about how to direct their efforts most meaningfully?
Well, I often get asked that question by young people. And the answer to that is you need to direct your efforts towards something you're passionate about. It's not just, you know, what should I do? It's what do I care about? If you care about something, then you're going to put your heart and soul into it and really make a difference. And don't do something just because, well, that's a good research project for a PhD. Just do what you're passionate about. That's my advice.
Thank you. How can researchers better engage with the general public to care about these issues and stop supporting the wildlife trade industry, especially through social media?
Good question. Telling the stories. Don't blind people with statistics because they won't remember them. And the general public doesn't care two hoots about statistics. I mean, I'm a perfect example. I don't remember the statistics. I know they're terrible, but I don't remember them. But a story, if you tell a story, so I've been fortunate. I've been all around the world. I can talk about climate change because I've seen the ice melting in Greenland, where it never used to melt, even in the height of summer. I've seen people driven from their homes by the rising sea levels, partly because the water expands with heating and partly because of the melting of the ice. I've seen the effects of the terrible and more frequent hurricanes and typhoons, the flooding, the droughts, and the terrible wildfires that we're being subjected to. So telling these stories and trying to find a human interest or an animal interest story among it, that's what's going to make people care. That's what's going to make people want to do whatever they can to make the world a better place.
Thank you. Our next question is that in research focused on community-based approaches to conservation, community engagement is often not prioritized in national planning. How do we prioritize that?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of it. When we do community-based conservation, what did you say?
Of course, in research focused on community-based approaches to conservation, community engagement is often not prioritized in national planning. How can we redress that? Well,
by understanding how important it is and by looking at the results that we get when we do engage with communities. And, you know, the point is that conservation groups so often have got it wrong. And so often they've said, well, here's an area of biodiversity, we've got to protect it, so the people have to go. The people are thrown out, but it's their land, they live there. And we see so many terrifying results of that with the indigenous people, say in Latin America. So once you understand what can happen when you do work with the local people, once you understand that it's their land and that we'll be gone and in their hands the future will be, then involve them, get them to be your partners and see the results.
Thank you. I suppose a follow-up question to that is, could you say a bit more about how scientists in particular can co-create conservation solutions with local people in developing countries?
Well, I described it. I mean, the only thing I can tell you about is our Take Care to Kari program, which truly does involve people right from the very beginning, working with them, getting their advice. And, you know, so many conservation groups and scientists have gone in and they've sort of gone into a community. They've seen what's been going wrong. They're telling those people what they've done wrong, and they're trying to interfere and do things their way. But you've got to work with the people. You've got to respect that actually there's an ancient knowledge there. And so often it's been us that have broken down that ancient knowledge. It's been us who've destroyed the small family farms in so many parts of the world to introduce monocultures and driven so many people because of that away from the land into the cities, changed people from being proud farmers in charge of their own land to becoming beggars in the city. And it's tragic. So it's a question of understanding how we need to work, how we need to operate, and acknowledging that the local people understand the land. They knew the kind of crops to grow that would be strong against periods of drought and flooding. And we come in and say, oh no, this is stupid. You just have to have this monoculture. It destroys the soil and it's horrible. So that's what we have to do, work with the people.
Thank you. Our next question is, yours has been a life of both scholarship and action. Given the ways universities work today, is that still possible for the researchers who are now beginning their careers?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, when I first went to study the chimps, I had no degree of any sort. We couldn't afford university when I left school. I grew up during World War II. And, but when I was 10, I dreamed of going to Africa and living with wild animals and writing books about them because young girls weren't scientists at that time. And I got there. I saved up money. I was invited by a school friend, met Louis Leakey, and amazingly, he gave me the opportunity to study the chimps. And one of the first things that hit me was how like us they were. The communication, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another on the back, the fights between males competing for dominance for the alpha position, looking so like human male politicians as they stand upright and swagger and bristle their hair and have furious skulls on their faces, try to look as fierce and intimidating and dangerous as they can. It's just like some human male politicians, naming no names, but probably everybody knows who I'm talking about. And so it became very clear to me after 1.5 years that there really isn't a sharp line between us and these closest living relatives. And they not only show love, compassion, and altruism, they also have a dark side, just like us, war and violence. And so it was clear that there wasn't a sharp line dividing us from them. When I got to Cambridge University in 1962, or one or two, I was actually told I'd done everything wrong, that I shouldn't have named the chimpanzees. They should have had numbers. That was scientific. I couldn't talk about them having personalities, minds capable of problem solving, or certainly not emotions. Those were unique to us. But I'd been taught as a child by my dog, who's here behind me always, that that wasn't true, that the scientists, for all their erudite knowledge, which I didn't have, were wrong in this case. So, as I've always done throughout my advocacy, I didn't challenge them. I didn't say, you're wrong. I just went calmly on talking about the chimpanzees as I knew them. And fortunately, Geographic had paid for a filmmaker to come, and his films began to come out there. And science slowly began to change. They had to. I mean, I honestly don't think they believed at the time that animals didn't have personality, mind, and emotion, but they couldn't prove it. Science must prove everything. And so they brushed it under the carpet. And thanks to the chimpanzees, I was able to bring it out and out from under the carpet. And I was also told that to be a good scientist, you cannot have empathy with your subject. And that is rubbish. Of course you can. Of course you can have empathy. And when you have empathy, you sometimes get this intuition. I know why that chimpanzee or whatever animal it is behaving like that. And when you've had that intuition, you can step back, put on your scientific hat and say, okay, that's what I think, now let me prove it. So being at Cambridge taught me to think in a scientific way, logically, which I love. I loved what I learned when I was at Cambridge. And I went there to do a PhD because Lewis Leakey, my mentor, told me there was no time to mess about with an undergraduate degree. And anyway, I got the PhD and started this research station. So I can't quite remember what the question was, but if you're going against the scientific, the sort of thinking of the time, have the courage of your conviction and just hang in there and don't be intimidated. That's all I can say.
How does increased skepticism in science and scientific knowledge, has it affected your career in any way? And how could it shape future research agendas? Well,
I mean, I've been on the other end of skepticism ever since I began. But as I only cared, I mean, I didn't ever want to be a scientist. That's something which doesn't really apply to young people today in a scientific career. I didn't want to be a scientist. I wanted to be a naturalist. All I cared about was learning about chimpanzees. And so, okay, there was all this criticism of my methods and all this, that, and the other. And I had to get the degree to please Lewis Leakey, who stuck his neck out in the first place to get the money for me to study the chimps. But all I wanted was to get back and go on learning about the chimps. So I don't know, when people today, you know, they've embarked on a scientific career, and it's really important for them to some extent, to follow the dictates of science, but it's not always the right way to go. And so, I don't know, some people, I'm not sure that all young scientists can go against the flow, but they should try to.
Thank you. We have a few younger audience members here today accompanying the researchers and their family. Our final question then comes from a much younger audience member who would like to know what children can do to protect chimpanzees and to protect all animals on Earth.
Well, you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, please join Roots and Shoots. Rootsandshoots.org is the website. And if you join Roots and Shoots, you will be able to choose a project that you're passionate about. And because you're part of a growing global family, you'll know that there are other people out there who are who have the same passion as you, and you can make contact with them. And so instead of just you caring about tigers, or just you caring about pollution in the ocean, or just you caring about plastic, you'll find that there's a whole lot of other people who care just like you do. And you can make contact with them, and that will give you courage and strength. And yes, we can do it, because that's what Roots and Shoots is all about, inspiring young people to understand that they make a difference. You, whoever's asking me this question, you make a difference every single day. And I would love for you to join our Roots and Shoots family and be linked up with other people just like you who want to make a difference.
Dr. Goodall, thank you for sharing your insights with us. I will now hand back over to Peter Lenny.
Thank you again, Dr. Goodall, for these very inspiring remarks. Now, as background to the breakout workshops, I'd like very briefly to tell you about WUN's research agenda, what's distinctive about it, and the opportunities to engage with it.
Can I say goodbye to everybody? Because I have to go.
Do please.
So before you do that, everybody
Yes.
who's been listening, thank you for listening. And, you know, if you have questions that weren't answered through, I think you can get them through to me and I will answer them by email. So anyway, thank you for listening and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. So the key attribute that WUN can bring to the table is the diversity of its member universities. They're all major research institutions that sit in very different geographical, cultural, and legal contexts that not only shape how they support research and deliver education, but also provide them with distinctive, varied perspectives on many important research problems. WUN adds value because by capitalizing on the varied geographies and cultures of its members, it can assemble and support diverse teams of collaborators to tackle major research problems in fields where comparative analysis matters. So how do you become engaged? We welcome your engagement in our programs. The network provides a wide conduit to interesting and sometimes surprising international research collaborations. Many of them address real-world problems and offer opportunities for researchers to deploy their disciplinary expertise in new ways. How can you become engaged with what we do? The principal mechanism for supporting research is our Research Development Fund, a small grants program to seed collaborative work that we hope leads to major continuing projects. The WUN website has pages covering current and previous projects. And let me give you just a few words about the nature of the competition. It's an annual competition. It opens in July and closes in October. It supports work under the large umbrella of sustainable development. Early career researchers are eligible to apply for these awards, so we encourage you to explore opportunities for collaboration in your breakout sessions. Beyond the RDF, we organize research activities through our 4 Global Challenge Steering Groups, in which you can also become engaged. Beyond the RDF, that is the Research Development Fund, these Global Challenge Groups organize workshops and larger collaborative projects within their domains. There are 4 of them: understanding cultures, public health, responding to climate change, and global higher education and research. So how do you connect with us? Very quickly before we move to the breakout sessions, you can learn more about WUN through the following means. Sign up to the WUN Hub on our website. This is a platform for WUN researchers to search and connect with colleagues or with ongoing WUN research projects. Under the Research tab on the website, you can find information on how to contact our Global Challenge Steering Groups. And each member university has a local coordinator whose details are available on the governance page of our website. Coordinators are key individuals who are happy to help you launch your engagement in WUN. And we'll also, of course, send all of you a follow-up email summarizing these ways to engage. And finally, Our Secretariat staff are also happy to answer questions you might have on opportunities to engage. During the breakout workshop sessions we're about to start, there's a room called WUN Information, where our staff are available to answer your questions. So thank you, and do please engage with each other in the breakout rooms and start collaborations. Thank you again.